Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Thanks. I was 13 the first time I realized how fragile the line was between childhood fun and something that could have ended my life. Back then, I wasn't the kind of kid who thought much about danger. I grew up in a quiet town called Red Cliff, New Hampshire, where most of us knew each other by name, and parents still let their kids roam around until dark without worrying. My parents were protective but not suffocating, and when I begged to go spend the night at my friend Marissa's house one Friday evening in late September of 2019, they didn't think twice about it. Marissa had just moved into this old two-story house that sat deep in the woods. It wasn't one of those new houses tucked neatly in a subdivision. It was the kind of place that had history. Faded green shutters, a long gravel driveway, and a cliff in the back where you could see the ocean of Blackthorn Cove if you stood at the right angle. She had invited me and our other friend Talia to sleep over. For weeks leading up to it, it was all we talked about at lunch. Middle school drama felt so big back then, crushes, friend fights, who sat with who at the cafeteria table. I couldn't wait to stay up all night and vent about it all. The ride over to Marissa's was long. My mom drove me through winding back roads, trees on both sides, no streetlights. The kind of quiet where you noticed your own breathing. My mom glanced at me as we pulled into the driveway. "You've got your phone, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, holding it up. "Good. And remember, if you feel weird about anything, just call me." Doesn't matter how late it is, I rolled my eyes a little. "Mom, I'll be fine." "It's just Marissa's still." She lingered in the car even after I got out, waiting until Marissa came to the door to wave before she pulled away. At the time, I thought she was just being overprotective. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if she had that same gut feeling I would later. Marissa's house was even creepier up close. The front porch creaked under my shoes, and the windows reflected nothing but blackness from the forest. Inside, though, it was cozy in that still moving in kind of way. Boxes stacked in the hallway, mismatched furniture. Marissa's mom greeted me warmly and told us pizza would be here soon. Talia was already there, sprawled out on the living room floor with a pile of blankets. "Finally," she said, throwing a pillow at me. "We've been waiting forever." I laughed and dropped my bag. "Sorry, my mom drives like a grandma." Marissa smirked. "Don't blame her. My mom said there are like moose and coyotes on these back roads. I wouldn't want to drive fast either." We set up our camp in the living room, pillows everywhere, blankets in a heap, the usual sleepover chaos. When the pizza finally arrived, we devoured it while blasting music from Marissa's phone. For a while, it felt like any normal Friday night. We played Truth or Dare. We laughed too hard over TikToks. We gossiped about the people in our class who seemed to live for drama. Hours blurred by, and when the clock hit almost 11, the energy in the room had shifted. That restless kind of boredom kicked in, the kind that makes you want to do something stupid just to break the lull. Talia suggested, "Let's go for a walk. Down the road. Just for like 10 minutes, Marissa bit her lip. "I don't know. My mom might say no." "Ask her," Talia pressed. "Come on, it's not like we're sneaking out." "We'll stay together," Marissa reluctantly asked, and to our surprise, her mom shrugged. "Stay on the road. Don't go wandering off, and don't take too long, it's late." That was all we needed. The gravel road stretched ahead of us, framed by tall pines that blocked out the sky. The air had that damp, salty edge that always drifted in from Blackthorn Cove at night. Our flashlights cut small circles into the darkness, but beyond that was nothing. At first, it felt exciting. We laughed too loud, daring each other to run ahead, whispering spooky stories just to freak each other out. But about 10 minutes in, we weren't laughing anymore. Because we weren't alone. I saw him first, a man walking toward us on the opposite side of the road. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People walked at night all the time, right? But the more we looked, the less sense it made. He was wearing a thick padded jacket, like the kind you'd wear in January. But it was nearly 60 degrees out and we were sweating in hoodies. His hood was up, shadowing most of his face. We passed him without saying a word. The smell hit us before anything else. It was putrid, like rotting garbage left in the sun, like something dead. I gagged, covering my nose. "Jesus," Talia muttered, stumbling sideways. Marissa whispered, "Oh my God, what the hell is that smell?" We hurried past, holding our breath until we thought we were clear. Talia darted to the tree line, dry heaving. "Let's just go back," I said firmly. "Seriously, I don't like this." Everyone agreed without hesitation. But heading back meant passing him again. And this time, when we glanced over our shoulders, he wasn't walking in the same direction anymore. He was behind us, following. Our footsteps quickened. Gravel crunched under our sneakers. I tried to keep my breathing even, but my chest felt tight. "Is he?" Marissa whispered. "Yes," I hissed. We walked faster. He walked faster. We started jogging. He jogged too. "Run!" Talia screamed. We bolted. My lungs burned, my heart hammering. I risked a glance back and saw him sprinting now, arms pumping, something metallic catching the faint beam of my flashlight. It looked like a knife. "Go! Go!" I shouted. We screamed as we tore down the road, and then, just as suddenly as he charged, he stopped, stood there motionless, watching us flee. His silhouette lingered against the tree line like a nightmare burned into my eyes. We didn't stop running until Marissa's house came into view. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, locked it, and collapsed in the living room, gasping for air. No one wanted to wake her parents. We were terrified they wouldn't believe us, or worse, that we'd be blamed for sneaking around. So we made a silent agreement. We wouldn't say anything. Not tonight. But the night wasn't over. It was nearly 2 a.m. by the time we'd calmed down enough to put on a movie. Something scary, because for some reason that felt safer than silence. The house overlooked Blackthorn Cove, which meant the entire backside was lined with big glass windows. Marissa had warned us that deer sometimes came right up to them at night. So when I heard footsteps outside right by the window where I sat, I told myself it was probably the deer. But when I pressed my face to the glass, I didn't see a deer. I saw nothing, just black. "I swear I heard something," I whispered. "Probably the deer," Marissa mumbled, not taking her eyes off the screen. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but my stomach twisted. The night dragged on. By 3 a.m., Marissa and Talia were asleep, but I couldn't. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. The moonlight shifted across the waves below the cliff, and I caught movement, just a flicker in the trees. I grabbed a flashlight. I wish I hadn't. Because when the beam hit the tree line, I saw him again. The man. Only this time, he wasn't wearing his heavy jacket. He wasn't wearing anything above the waist. His pale chest gleamed in the light. My throat closed. I dropped the flashlight. "Marissa! Talia, wake up!" Talia stirred, groggy. What is it?" "Look! Out there!" But when she looked, he was gone. Talia groaned. "You're imagining things. Stop trying to freak me out." She rolled over and pulled the blanket over her head. I sat awake, shaking. And then around 4:30 came the knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. I froze. Every cell in my body screamed not to move, not to answer, but I couldn't help myself. I crept to the peephole. No one. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Covered myself with a blanket like that thin fabric could protect me. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless sleep. But the smell woke me, that same unbearable stench. Inside the house. I sat up in the dark, bile rising in my throat. Footsteps creaked across the living room floor. I whipped my flashlight around, and the beam landed on him. The man, standing in the corner of the room, watching. I screamed. Talia and Marissa bolted upright, their shrieks joining mine. And just like before, he ran. Out the back door into the woods, gone before Marissa's parents rushed down the stairs. We told them everything through tears. Marissa's mom called the police. Her dad grabbed his shotgun and stormed out into the night. The cops came an hour later. They searched the area. They found nothing at first. But a week later, we heard. That old shed down the road, the one we dared each other to go near earlier in the night, was searched. Inside were 5 bodies in various stages of decay. And suddenly everything made sense. The jacket, the smell, his silence. We were seconds, maybe inches, away from being added to that shed. I still think about that night, about how easily it could have gone differently, about how if he hadn't stopped running, if one of us had tripped, if I'd opened the door at that knock, we wouldn't be here. I never went to another sleepover again. And sometimes when the wind shifts just right, carrying that sharp, salty air from the cove, I swear I can still smell it. That sickly, rotting stench, the reminder of what was waiting in the woods. I never really liked sleepovers, not the way most people talk about them. For me, they were always this strange mix of excitement and dread. Excitement because it meant leaving home, staying up late, eating junk food, laughing until my sides hurt. Things every teenager wants. But dread because even as a kid I had this uncomfortable feeling that being in someone else's house overnight meant giving up a layer of safety I couldn't quite explain. My parents were protective, sometimes overly so, but they also trusted me enough to let me experience normal teenage stuff. That balance is probably why I agreed to go to the sleepover at Nathan's house the summer I turned 16. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted that small voice in the back of my mind telling me to say no. It was July, the sticky kind of summer where the heat clung to your skin even at night. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio, Mapleton. Nothing spectacular about it, just your average mix of suburban streets, strip malls, and patches of woods in between. My circle of friends was pretty small. There was Nathan, who was the loudest of the group, always cracking jokes, never afraid to be the center of attention. Then there was Brandon, quieter, thoughtful, the kind of guy who didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. And finally Sarah, who wasn't officially part of the group, but floated in and out often enough that we counted her in. We'd all been hanging out more that summer since none of us had jobs yet. Most nights were spent biking around town, hanging out at the 24-hour diner near the highway, or sitting on someone's porch with music low enough not to wake the neighbors. Then Nathan got the idea for a sleepover at his place. His parents were away for the weekend visiting family in Cincinnati. "Come on," he said, leaning against his bike as we sat outside the diner one night. "We'll order pizza, play Xbox all night, maybe sneak out later and hit the lake. Nobody's gonna stop us." "It's the perfect setup," Brandon raised an eyebrow. "You sure your parents are cool with that?" Nathan grinned, shoving a fry in his mouth. "They don't need to know. They'll be back Sunday night. We got Friday and Saturday all to ourselves." "No rules." Sarah sipped her soda, giving him that skeptical look she always did when he bragged. "You realize if anything happens, you're the one they're gonna kill, right?" "Nothing's gonna happen," Nathan said. "It'll just be fun." "Come on, you all in?" I hesitated. I don't know why, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. Maybe it was just my natural tendency to overthink, but the idea of staying overnight in his big creaky house out on Old Briar Road didn't sit right. His place was surrounded by woods on 3 sides, with the nearest neighbor a good 5-minute walk down the road, but Brandon was nodding. Sarah shrugged, and I didn't want to be the odd one out. "Yeah, I'm in," I said, forcing a smile. That's how it started. Friday evening, I packed a small duffel bag, change of clothes, toothbrush, phone charger. My mom fussed over me like she always did. "Text me when you get there," she said, handing me a couple of granola bars. "And if you need me to pick you up anytime, I mean it. You call, okay?" "I'll be fine, Mom," I muttered, embarrassed but secretly comforted. The sun was dipping low by the time I got to Nathan's place. His house always looked a little intimidating. 2 stories, dark green paint peeling in spots, shutters that rattled whenever the wind picked up. The driveway was cracked, weeds growing up through the cement. My stomach tightened when I saw it again, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. Nathan greeted me at the door with his usual grin, wearing a faded band t-shirt and gym shorts. "Dude, you made it. Brandon's already here." Sarah's on her way. I stepped inside, the air smelling faintly of dust and something else, like old wood that had soaked up years of dampness. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavier than normal silence, like it absorbed sound instead of letting it bounce. We set up in the living room, dragging out blankets, pillows, and snacks. Brandon was already sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, and gave me a small nod. Nathan shoved a slice of pizza at me the second Sarah arrived, and for a while everything felt normal. We played games, argued over music, told dumb stories. Hours slipped by, and by midnight the living room was a chaos of soda cans and chip bags. That's when things started to change. Around 1 a.m. the power flickered. Just a quick blink, but long enough to make the TV cut out and the room go dark before the lights came back. "Damn it," Nathan muttered, banging the controller. "That better not happen again." Sarah laughed nervously. "Your house is creepy enough without the lights going out." Nathan rolled his eyes. "It's just old wiring." Chill. But when the power cut out again at 1:17, this time for almost 30 seconds, the mood shifted. We sat in the dark, the only sound the faint buzz of cicadas outside. Brandon said quietly. "Was that footsteps?" We all froze. At first I thought he was joking, but then I heard it too, slow, deliberate steps upstairs. One after another, like someone walking carefully across the second floor. Nathan forced a laugh. "Relax, it's the house settling. Happens all the time." "No," Sarah whispered. "That was footsteps." The lights blinked back on and we all glanced at each other, uneasy. Nathan got up, trying to look tough. "Fine, I'll prove it. Nobody's up there." "I'll check." "Don't," I blurted out, surprising myself. He looked at me, smirking. "What, you scared?" I swallowed hard. If it's nothing, why bother?" But he was already heading for the stairs. I didn't want to follow, but none of us wanted to sit alone either, so we all trailed behind Nathan as he climbed the creaky staircase. My heart hammered in my chest with every step. The upstairs hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. Nathan swung open his parents' bedroom first. Empty. Then his room. Messy, but normal. The guest room. Nothing. Finally, the last door at the end of the hall. The attic hatch above it. The footsteps had sounded like they came from there. He reached for the pull string, but Sarah grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said firmly. Nathan rolled his eyes. "You guys are seriously freaking out over nothing." But for once, he didn't pull it. We stood there in tense silence, the house groaning faintly around us. Then, clear as day, 3 slow knocks came from above us in the attic. Knock, knock, knock. We bolted. Back downstairs, we tried to laugh it off, but nobody really could. Brandon's face was pale. Sarah kept glancing at the ceiling, and I felt sick to my stomach. Nathan tried to act unfazed, but even he couldn't keep his hands from shaking slightly when he picked up his soda. "Old houses make noise," he muttered almost to himself. "But old houses don't knock in threes." We decided to put on a movie, something dumb and funny to distract ourselves. The sound helped a little, filling the heavy silence, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow in that house felt darker than it should have been. Around 3 a.m., Sarah dozed off against the arm of the couch, Brandon half asleep in a chair. Nathan was scrolling his phone when the power cut out again. This time for good. The TV went black. The lamps died. The only light came from the moon through the thin curtains. And then we heard it again. The footsteps. But this time they weren't upstairs. They were on the stairs, coming down. Nathan jumped up, grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. He flicked it on, the beam shaking as it lit the staircase. We all stared. Halfway down the stairs stood a figure. Tall. Too tall. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Its body looked stretched, thin arms dangling too long at its sides. The beam of the flashlight caught its face, or what should have been a face, but it was wrong. Flat. featureless except for two deep indentations where eyes should have been. Sarah screamed. Brandon scrambled back. My whole body locked up. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, staring with those hollow indentations. Then slowly it tilted its head like it was studying us. Nathan dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the floor as the figure took one step forward. The sound was unmistakable, dragging like something heavy being pulled. That broke me free. "Run!" I shouted. We bolted out the back door, barefoot, not even thinking about grabbing our stuff. The night air was thick and hot, but it felt like freedom compared to the suffocating weight of that house. We tore across the yard into the trees, branches scratching at our arms. Sarah was sobbing, Brandon wheezing as he tried to keep up. Nathan, for once, was silent. We didn't stop until we saw the faint glow of a streetlight at the end of Old Briar Road. Only then did we collapse, gasping for air, our bodies trembling. "What the hell was that?" Sarah cried. No one answered. There was no answer. We called my mom from a payphone at the gas station down the road. She picked us up, furious and terrified all at once. Nathan begged us not to tell his parents what happened, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't so sure anymore. The next day, when we went back in daylight to get our bags, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The upstairs looked normal. The attic hatch was closed. No footprints, no sign of anything. But Nathan's flashlight, the one he dropped, was lying on the bottom step of the staircase. The batteries were drained completely. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that figure. Too tall, too thin, its face hollow. And I wonder if it ever really stayed behind in that house, or if it followed us out into the woods waiting for another night. Because every now and then, late at night when the world is quiet and the house creaks, I swear I can still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. I never thought one weekend trip could change the way I looked at people forever. I was 27 in the summer of 2019, working in risk management for a large bank in Manhattan. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and with the kind of people I worked with, the best part wasn't the office itself. It was the happy hours afterward. Every Friday when the markets closed, we'd flood into midtown bars, half the office shoulder to shoulder in dim Irish pubs laughing too loud over pints of beer. That's where I met Dorian Hale. He was a transfer from our Boston office. Early 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, and the kind of guy who instantly commanded attention. Dorian had a way of talking like every story was the most interesting thing you'd ever hear. He spoke about backpacking through Europe, nights in Vegas, wild parties in LA. He claimed to know people, actors, musicians, models, and even though most of it sounded a little too polished, people listened. He was magnetic. I liked him, at least on the surface. He was easy to hang out with, easy to laugh with. But as weeks turned into months, I started noticing the holes in his stories. Details shifted, places changed. He'd brag about a girlfriend who sounded suspiciously like someone ripped from a magazine cover. I began to think of him as entertaining, but not entirely real. Still, he was fun to have around, and sometimes that's enough. That summer, Dorian invited me to his family's condo in Clearwater Beach, Florida. He said his mom owned it, and that he and his sister were heading there for a long weekend. "Come with," he said one afternoon after work, his grin wide. "It'll be great. Sun, ocean, bars. Better than sweating your ass off here." It sounded harmless. And when he mentioned there was plenty of space, I asked if I could bring my younger brother, Caleb. He was 20, home from college for the summer, and I thought a beach trip would be good for him. Dorian didn't hesitate. Of course. More the merrier. We flew down on a Thursday. The air in Tampa hit me like a hot, wet towel the second we stepped outside. Caleb groaned and muttered, "How do people live in this humidity?" Waiting at the curb was Dorian's younger sister, Lyra. She drove up in an old silver Jeep Cherokee with cracked leather seats. Lyra was different. She had dark shoulder-length hair tucked behind thick round glasses, wore a vintage Talking Heads t-shirt, and had chipped black nail polish. Her vibe was hard to pin down, quirky, sharp, but distant. She gave Caleb and me a quick half smile, then went back to scrolling through her phone as we drove across the causeway. The condo was nicer than I expected. 3 bedrooms, clean white tile floors that stayed cool underfoot, a balcony with a view of the Gulf. The furniture had that coastal look, light wood, blue cushions, seashell decor. Dorian and Lyra each took their own rooms, so Caleb and I shared. I joked, "If I meet a girl, you're stuck on the couch." He rolled his eyes. That first night, since we'd landed too late for the beach, Dorian insisted we hit the strip of bars. The crowd was older, retirees in polo shirts, women in sundresses. But the vibe was relaxed. At least it should have been. Dorian was different. He started pounding shots the second we sat down. His laugh was louder, his movements looser. He stumbled into conversations with strangers, leaning too close, hitting on women who clearly weren't interested. Caleb and I laughed it off at first. It was awkward but manageable. Then he crossed a line. A bigger guy confronted him after Dorian wouldn't leave his girlfriend alone. Voices rose. Caleb and I had to step in, pulling Dorian back while I apologized. The guy let it go, but as we walked away, Dorian shoved me hard in the chest. "You're a piece of shit, Adrian," he slurred. "You don't have my back." "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. Caleb stepped in between us. "Just chill, man." Even Lyra told him to relax, but Dorian stormed off into the night, muttering curses. Lyra sighed and followed, saying nothing. Caleb and I stayed behind. We finished our drinks, tried to shake off the tension. A couple of women at the bar, tourists from Ohio, struck up a conversation. We joked, exchanged numbers. They mentioned they were heading downtown later and invited us to join. When we finally walked back to the condo, I texted Dorian asking where he was. His reply came fast. Back at the condo. We opened the door expecting him to be angry, but instead he jumped up from the couch, grinning like nothing had happened. "So are we going out or what?" he asked, still obviously drunk. I told him maybe later that we should chill first. Then I mentioned the girls we met. His smile vanished. "How many?" he asked flatly. "2, I said. Caleb, trying to be funny, added, "Yeah, they even asked how we knew you." It was the wrong thing to say. Dorian's expression twisted. He stood abruptly and stormed to his room, slamming the door. I glanced at Lyra. "Is he always like this?" She looked at me coldly. "Like what?" Never mind. The tension was suffocating. Caleb and I retreated to our room, whispering about how bizarre he was acting. I knocked on Dorian's door once, asked if he wanted to come out with us. No response. Eventually, we decided to Uber downtown without them. At the bar, we had fun with the girls, but my phone buzzed nonstop. Dorian was blowing it up. "Where are you? How could you leave me here? Your stuff's going in the street. Don't come back." "I don't know why I invited you. I showed Caleb and the girls." Everyone frowned. Caleb muttered, "Something's wrong with him." We cut the night short and headed back. When we walked in, Dorian was sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at the wall. "You okay?" I asked carefully. He turned his head toward me, then looked away. "Yeah? Hope you had fun." Then he stood, walked to his room, and shut the door. We tried to shake it off, but as Caleb and I lay in our bunks talking, we heard footsteps on the wood floor outside. They stopped right in front of our door. I whispered, "He's standing right there." Caleb whispered back, "I know." We didn't move, didn't speak. 5 minutes dragged by before the footsteps finally retreated. Then we heard him talking in the living room, laughing to himself. I crept to the door, opened it a crack. Dorian stood in the corner, leaning against the wall with his head down, whispering. Then he laughed, muttering, "Adrian's such a stupid fuck." My stomach dropped. I shut the door quietly. Caleb and I whispered about leaving in the morning, getting a hotel. But around 20 minutes later, I woke to the sound of the door creaking open. Dorian stood there in the dark, staring. "What are you doing?" I snapped, sitting up. He lunged at me, screaming, hands reaching for my throat. "You're a piece of shit. I invited you here and you shit on me." Caleb yanked him off me, throwing him into the corner. Dorian scrambled up, yelling, face twisted with rage. We didn't wait. We packed in minutes, called an Uber, and left for a hotel. We stayed there until our flight Sunday. Back in New York, I saw Dorian a few times at the office, but he avoided me completely. Within a month, he'd transferred out. To this day, I don't know what was really wrong with him. But that night in Clearwater Beach still makes my skin crawl. I've never been the type to think much about ghosts. Honestly, I always thought that stuff belonged in movies or campfire stories, not real life. But the sleepover I had at my friend Daniel's house when I was 13, it's the one night that still makes me question everything I believed about what's real and what isn't. Even now, years later, I can remember every single detail, every sound, every flicker of fear that made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Daniel and I had been best friends since 4th grade. He just moved to our neighborhood back then, and we bonded over video games and our mutual hatred for math homework. By the time we were in middle school, we practically lived at each other's houses. I knew his parents, his younger sister, even his golden retriever. We'd had sleepovers before, but this one was different because it was the first one at his family's new house. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, which meant they could afford a bigger place. When I first heard that, I pictured some fancy modern home with clean lines and a flat-screen TV in every room. But when Daniel's mom drove me over on that Friday evening, my stomach sank as soon as I saw it. The house wasn't modern at all, it was old. Not just a little old, but the kind of old where the paint peels on the shutters and the front porch sags in the middle. "This place is huge," I said, trying to sound impressed as I grabbed my backpack from the car. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, but it's kind of creepy at night." "You'll see." He wasn't wrong. The house sat on a wide lot at the edge of town with giant oak trees that made the yard feel like it was swallowed in shade even before the sun went down. His mom said it used to belong to some retired professor who had passed away a few years earlier, and his family bought it because the price was too good to pass up. To me, it felt like the kind of place people whispered about in ghost stories. The inside was just as eerie. The wooden floors creaked under every step. The hallways were lined with old wallpaper that had yellowed over the years, and the doors were those heavy ones with brass knobs that clanked when you closed them. His parents hadn't even finished unpacking yet, so half the room still had stacks of boxes shoved against the walls. We set up in the living room first. His parents ordered pizza, and we tore into it while playing video games until our eyes hurt. Around 9, his little sister Emma went upstairs to bed, and his parents followed not long after. By then, Daniel and I were sprawled on the floor, surrounded by empty soda cans, chip bags, and a pile of candy wrappers. "You ever been up in the attic yet?" Daniel asked suddenly, his voice lower, like he didn't want his parents to hear. I shook my head. "No." "Why?" "There's some weird stuff up there. Old trunks and mirrors and I don't know, just creepy junk. My dad said most of it came with the house." I laughed nervously. "So what?" "It's just storage." He grinned in that way that meant he was about to push me into something stupid. "Bet you wouldn't stay up there alone for 10 minutes. I groaned. "Seriously? We're doing dares now?" "Come on, man," he pressed. "Don't tell me you're scared." "It's just an attic. What's the worst that could happen?" I wanted to say no, but the way he was looking at me, I knew he'd never let me live it down if I backed out. So I shrugged, trying to act casual. "Fine. 10 minutes. No big deal." We waited until the house felt completely quiet. No footsteps upstairs, no creaks from his parents moving around. Then Daniel led me to the hallway on the 2nd floor. At the very end was a square opening in the ceiling with a pull-down ladder. Even though it was closed, I could see faint drafts of cool air seeping down from it. Daniel reached up, tugged the cord, and the ladder unfolded with a long, creaking groan. He handed me a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. "Here. You're gonna need this." I tried to laugh it off, but my palms were already sweating as I grabbed it. 10 minutes, right? "Yup, I'll keep time. Don't chicken out." I climbed the ladder slowly, each rung bending under my weight. The moment my head poked through the opening, a musty odor hit me hard, like a mix of mold, dust, and something sour, almost like spoiled milk. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself the rest of the way up. The flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, catching dust motes that floated like tiny ghosts in the stale air. The attic was huge, with slanted wooden beams and a floor that creaked under my sneakers. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers, some half collapsed, spilling out yellowed books and cracked picture frames. There was broken furniture, too. Chairs with missing legs, a dresser with its drawers pulled out, and several old trunks with their leather peeling. I told myself it was just an attic, nothing scary about that. But then my light caught on something propped against the far wall, a mirror. It was tall and narrow, framed in tarnished gold that was flaking in places. The glass was so cloudy with grime I could barely make out my reflection. Still, something about it pulled me closer, like I had to see myself in it. As I raised my sleeve to wipe the surface, the glass shimmered. Not like a trick of dust, but like rippling water. For a split second, I saw something that wasn't me, a man. He was tall, thin, dressed in a black suit that looked out of fashion like something from 100 years ago. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes, God, his eyes were just dark pits, no whites, no color. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, and the flashlight slipped in my sweaty grip. When I looked again, it was just me staring back, pale, wide-eyed, terrified. "Everything good up there?" Daniel's voice called faintly from below. "Yeah," I shouted, though my voice cracked. I forced myself to keep looking around, trying to shake it off. Near the mirror was a trunk with the lid slightly open. I nudged it with my foot, and the lid creaked back. Inside were neatly folded men's clothes, dark suits though they were stiff with age. Beneath them, something caught my eye, a small framed photograph. I picked it up carefully. The picture showed a family, 2 parents and a boy about my age. The glass over the father's face was cracked straight through, like someone had smashed it deliberately. My stomach tightened. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not from downstairs. These were up here with me, heavy, slow, deliberate. "Daniel?" I called, my voice trembling. No answer. The footsteps stopped. I spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly, but the beam only revealed boxes and shadows. My chest tightened. Every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. Then I saw it in the mirror. The man in the black suit, standing just behind me. Closer this time. His face pale as death, eyes black voids that seemed to swallow the light. I screamed, dropping the photo as I bolted for the ladder. My knee scraped against the wood as I scrambled down so fast I nearly fell. I yanked the ladder up and slammed the attic door shut, panting. Daniel's grin vanished when he saw me. "Dude, what happened?" I shook my head, unable to speak. My throat felt locked. "Nothing," I whispered finally. "Just nothing." But I knew it wasn't nothing. A few weeks later, Daniel told me his parents were putting the house up for sale. He said his mom kept waking up at night because she swore she heard someone walking around upstairs, even when his dad checked and found nothing. They laughed it off when they told neighbors, saying maybe the house was just too big and old. But I know the truth. I know what I saw in that mirror. And it wasn't me. I never thought that one night could change the way I looked at my childhood, my friendships, and the feeling of safety in someone else's home. Back then, I was 16, caught in that strange in-between age where you're old enough to think you know everything, but still young enough to feel invincible. It was late October in 2012, a Friday night, when I got invited to spend the weekend at my friend Marcus's house. Marcus and I had known each other since middle school. He was the funny one in our group, the kid who could get a laugh out of anyone, even teachers. His house always had this laid-back vibe because his dad worked nights as a truck driver, and his mom was often traveling for work as a nurse. That meant fewer rules, later nights, and the kind of freedom that teenagers chase whenever they can get it. I grew up in a stricter household. My parents didn't let me out too often for overnights, but they liked Marcus. They thought he was responsible enough. If they only knew what was about to happen that night, I doubt they would have ever let me walk out the door. The night started simple. I packed a small duffel, hoodie, toothbrush, phone charger, a couple of snacks. Marcus lived only a 15-minute walk away in a quiet neighborhood outside of Portland, Oregon. His street was one of those half-finished developments where some houses looked lived in and cozy, but a few stood empty, their windows dark and construction never quite completed. When I got there, Marcus and another friend, Ethan, were already setting up for the night. Ethan was quieter, more observant than Marcus. He had these sharp green eyes that always seemed to notice things before the rest of us did. I liked having him around because he balanced Marcus's loudness with something calmer. "Finally, man," Marcus said, throwing open the front door as I stepped inside. "We were about to start the movie without you." "Yeah, right," I laughed, tossing my bag down by the couch. "Like you'd ever wait to watch something scary without me here to see you scream first." Marcus smirked. "Scary movies don't scare me." Ask Ethan. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You literally screamed last week when the neighbor's dog barked at you through the fence." I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Marcus flipped us both off and grabbed a can of soda from the fridge. "Shut up and sit down. We're watching The Exorcist." That was how our night started. Pizza boxes spread across the table, soda cans lined up like trophies, the glow of the TV lighting up the room while shadows flickered along the walls. Marcus's house wasn't creepy on its own. It was a 2-story place, pretty standard suburban build, but the unfinished houses across the street gave the neighborhood this eerie emptiness once the sun went down. His living room windows faced directly toward one of those vacant properties, and when the curtains were left open, you could see the dark, skeletal frame of a house half built, like a corpse that never got its skin. I didn't think much of it then, but Ethan kept glancing out the window whenever he thought no one was looking. "You good?" I asked him once during a lull in the movie. He shrugged. "Just thought I saw someone over there earlier." "Probably nothing," Marcus waved him off. "Dude, nobody lives there. It's been empty for years. Don't get in his head, Alex." "That's me, Alex." I brushed it off too. At that age, we all believed nothing could really happen to us. Around midnight, after 2 horror movies, half a pizza each, and countless bad jokes, we decided to switch to video games. The living room was messy, wrappers on the floor, soda rings on the coffee table. That was just how Marcus liked it. We were deep into a round of Call of Duty when Marcus paused suddenly. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Ethan and I froze. The house went quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Hear what?" I asked. "Like footsteps upstairs." I frowned. "Your dad home?" Marcus shook his head. "Nah, he's hauling freight tonight. Won't be back till tomorrow afternoon." The silence grew heavier. Ethan set his controller down. I heard it too. I told myself it was the house settling, but the uneasiness had already crept into me. We got up and crept upstairs together like kids daring each other to touch a hot stove. The hallway lights flickered slightly, which didn't help. Marcus pushed open his bedroom door. Nothing. His mom's room was empty, the guest room too. "See?" he said, trying to sound braver than he looked. "Just the house creaking." But Ethan didn't look convinced. "Creaks don't sound like footsteps." We went back downstairs, trying to laugh it off, but something in the air had shifted. It must have been close to 2 a.m. when it happened. We were half asleep on the couches, a movie playing quietly in the background, when there came a sharp knock at the front door. 3 knocks. Steady. We all sat up. Marcus grabbed the remote and muted the TV. The knock came again. 3 slow thuds, like someone making sure we'd heard them. "Who the hell?" Marcus muttered, getting up. "Wait," Ethan said quickly. "Don't just open it." Marcus rolled his eyes. "It's probably a neighbor or something." But neighbors don't knock at 2 a.m. And when Marcus flicked on the porch light, the view through the peephole showed no one. "Nobody's there," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. I remember my throat going dry. "You're sure? Look for yourself." He stepped aside. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Porch light on, empty driveway. The half-built house across the street stood in silence, its dark windows staring back. But as I turned away, a new sound echoed from the back of the house, scraping like nails dragging across glass. We froze. The scraping continued at the sliding back door in the kitchen. Ethan whispered, "Someone's outside." Marcus, being Marcus, tried to act tough. He grabbed a baseball bat from the coat closet. "Stay here," he said, though his voice was thinner than usual. "No way, man," I said, grabbing his arm. "We stick together." The three of us crept into the kitchen. The sliding glass door had thin curtains drawn across it. Behind the fabric, a shadow moved, not just moved, stood there, still watching. My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. Ethan's hand gripped my sleeve, then without warning, the shadow ducked down and vanished. Marcus yanked the curtain open, bat raised, but the porch was empty. Only the faint breeze moved through the trees. We didn't sleep after that. By 3 a.m., we were huddled together in the living room with every light on. Marcus had locked all the doors, double-checked the windows, and even set up a chair under the doorknob like in some cheesy movie. That's when the power cut out. Everything went black. Ethan cursed under his breath. My skin prickled with cold sweat. Then, footsteps. Inside the house this time, slow, deliberate, from upstairs. Marcus gripped the bat so tightly his knuckles went white. "This isn't funny," he called out, his voice breaking. The footsteps descended the stairs one at a time. We didn't breathe. And then, from the shadows of the stairwell, a man emerged, short, burly, dressed in black. His eyes caught the faint moonlight spilling through the window, yellow, almost glowing. In his hand was a long hunting knife. For a moment, none of us moved. Time itself seemed to stop. Then he smiled. "I knew there were 3 of you," he rasped. 3 heads are better than one. Red sells best. We didn't even understand at first. But then his gaze fixed on Marcus, red-haired Marcus. The man lunged forward. Marcus swung the bat, connecting with his arm. The knife clattered to the floor, and I dove for it instinctively, my body moving before my brain could catch up. The man roared, slamming Marcus into the wall. Ethan screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. I grabbed the knife, and when the man came at me, I thrust it upward with every ounce of fear and rage I had. The blade sank into his chest. He staggered back, eyes wide, gasping like a wounded animal. Then he collapsed onto the carpet, blood pooling fast. The room went silent except for our ragged breaths. Marcus slid down the wall, trembling. Ethan was pale, shaking uncontrollably. My hands were slick with blood, the knife still clutched between my fingers. I killed him. We called the police, our words stumbling over each other. By the time officers arrived, the man was long gone, dead before they even checked his pulse. The cops told us later he'd been on a spree targeting red-haired kids across the state. Marcus would have been next. Maybe Ethan or me too, just for being there. My parents pulled me out of school for a week after that. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of yellow eyes watching me from the dark. Marcus never joked the same way again. Ethan grew quieter, more distant. And me? I still can't sit through a sleepover without checking every lock, every shadow. People talk about scary movies, urban legends, and ghost stories. But nothing compares to the sound of real footsteps in a house you thought was safe. Nothing compares to looking death in the eyes and realizing he chose your friend first. I was 14 the summer everything changed. The summer I learned how quickly a single night can rewire the way you see the world. I used to think of sleepovers as something harmless, exciting even. A chance to stay up late, share secrets, eat junk food, and laugh until our stomachs hurt. But after what happened at Ellie Morgan's house, I don't think I'll ever hear the word sleepover without a chill running down my spine. Ellie was 1 year older than me, 15 at the time. She lived right next door to us in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Brookfield, Illinois. Our houses were nearly identical 2-story homes built in the late 70s, though hers always felt gloomier inside. Maybe it was the heavy curtains her dad kept drawn, or maybe it was because her mom had left when she was 8, and the place had never felt complete since. Ellie's dad, Richard, worked long shifts at the warehouse out by the interstate. He was gruff, tired most of the time, but he had a soft spot for Ellie. He let her bend the rules, like staying up late on weekends or watching scary shows that my parents would have grounded me for even glancing at. My mom and dad were religious and strict. No horror movies, no staying up past 11, no boys allowed within 10 feet. So every time I got to stay at Ellie's, it felt like stepping into another world. That weekend, my parents were gone celebrating their anniversary in Wisconsin. They trusted Richard to keep an eye on me, even though he barely noticed we existed once he sat down with a beer and the Cubs game. Ellie had invited me over Friday evening, promising we could binge old VHS tapes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer she'd found at a thrift store. I remember walking over just before sunset with my sleeping bag slung over my shoulder, feeling like nothing bad could possibly happen. Ellie's bedroom was on the second floor, the one that faced her backyard. Posters covered her walls, bands I didn't know, quotes from movies my parents never let me watch. She had a small TV balanced on top of her dresser, hooked up to a battered VCR. We laid out popcorn, soda, and some leftover pizza her dad had picked up. "This is gonna be great," Ellie grinned, popping in the first tape. "We're staying up all night," I laughed nervously. "All night? You think we'll make it?" She nudged me. "Of course. You're with me now. No early bedtime rules." We pressed play, and for hours the flickering light from the TV filled her room as vampires, witches, and monsters fought across the screen. Around 1 a.m., my eyelids started to droop, but Ellie kept nudging me awake. "Don't be lame, Kara," she whispered, using the nickname she'd given me. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember clearly was waking to an ear-splitting sound. It wasn't like fireworks. It wasn't like a car backfiring. It was sharp, violent, and so close it felt like someone had clapped their hands inside my head. I shot upright. Ellie was already awake, clutching her blanket, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "That was a gunshot," I said, my voice shaking. We both crept to her window, but the only view was her backyard. The old wooden swing her dad had built years ago swayed slightly in the breeze. Everything else looked calm, almost too calm. "Maybe it was outside," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them. The sound had felt inside. Ellie shook her head. "Dad wouldn't want us moving around. We should stay here," but my heart was pounding too fast to stay put. "I'm just going to check the front window," I told her. "If it's nothing, we'll come back." Reluctantly, she followed me as we crept toward her bedroom door. The house was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight seeping through the living room curtains. As we reached the top of the stairs, I froze. There were voices, low, urgent bickering. "You said the place would be empty." "I thought it would be." "They said the daughter was staying with neighbors this weekend." "Well then, who's this guy?" Ellie grabbed my arm. "Don't," she mouthed. But I leaned forward just enough to peer through the banister. My stomach lurched. At the foot of the stairs lay Richard. His body was stiff, sprawled across the tile, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes staring glassy and lifeless toward the ceiling. Ellie squeezed my arm so tightly it hurt. She hadn't seen yet. 2 figures stood in the foyer, dressed in black, large duffel bags slung over their shoulders. One held a pistol loosely at his side. "This is your fault," the taller one hissed. "You didn't have to shoot him. He came out of nowhere. What was I supposed to do, let him call the cops? You should have just knocked him out." "Now we've got a body." I pulled Ellie back before she could see. My voice trembled. "We need to hide." "Now why? What's happening? What did you see?" I swallowed hard. "I'll explain later. Just trust me." Ellie led me to the guest room down the hall, the one her grandmother decorated years ago. It had a big queen-sized bed with a lace bed skirt that touched the floor. Perfect for hiding. We slid under, pressing ourselves against the hardwood, our breaths shallow. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Ellie's hand shook in mine. Tears welled in her eyes. "Just breathe through your nose," I whispered. "Slow." Quiet downstairs, drawers slammed open, furniture scraped. Heavy thuds echoed, the sound of her father's body being moved. My chest tightened, but I couldn't let Ellie know yet. Then footsteps climbed the stairs. The door creaked open. Boots crossed the floorboards. We saw them, black leather, inches from our faces, the only thing separating us being that thin lace fabric. The man searched the dresser, yanking open drawers. He rifled through the closet, then, horrifyingly, he dropped to the floor. The lace skirt lifted. His eyes met ours. Cold, calculating. I slapped a hand over my mouth. Ellie let out a tiny whimper. The man pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh." He lowered the skirt back down and stood. We didn't move, didn't breathe. For what felt like hours, the sound of rummaging drifted through the house. At some point, silence fell, but neither of us dared to crawl out. The first rays of sunlight finally gave us the courage to move. My body ached from lying stiff all night. Ellie crawled out first, eyes red and puffy. "I'm going to find Dad," she whispered. "Ellie, wait!" But she was already running down the hall. I searched frantically for a phone, but every receiver was gone. Even the cordless base was missing. My stomach sank. They'd taken them. Ellie's scream tore through the house. I rushed downstairs. The foyer was empty, no body, no blood. Just faint smears where something had been dragged across the floor. "They took him," Ellie sobbed, collapsing to her knees. "Where is he? Where's my dad?" I didn't have an answer. I bolted out the front door and ran barefoot across the street to the Petersons' house. I pounded on the door until Mr. Peterson appeared, confused and half awake. "Please," I gasped, "call the police." They killed Ellie's dad. The cops came within minutes. They questioned us separately, scribbling notes as we recounted everything. They found no signs of forced entry, no shell casings, no blood, as if it had all been cleaned. But when they tracked Richard's phone, they found it still pinging off a tower miles away. Eventually, they caught the two men, career burglars who'd picked the wrong house. The thing that haunted me most was the detail I didn't tell Ellie until weeks later. They hadn't meant to break into her house. They'd been targeting mine. My parents had mentioned their trip to someone at work, and word spread. If Ellie hadn't invited me over that night, it would have been my dad lying in the foyer. Ellie moved in with her grandparents not long after. We kept in touch for a while, but things were never the same. Every time I saw her dad's lifeless eyes. Every time I tried to sleep, I heard that gunshot. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see the man under the bed lifting the skirt, staring at me and choosing, for some reason I'll never understand, to let us live. I never thought of myself as the kind of girl who scared easily. I wasn't into being dramatic, and even as a kid, I rolled my eyes when people jumped at shadows or screamed in haunted houses. But what happened the night of that sleepover at my friend's place, what happened when I was just 13, is something that still crawls into my mind even now as an adult. Back then, my world was pretty small. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. My parents were teachers, strict in some ways, but trusting enough to let me spend weekends at my best friend's house. That best friend was Claire. We'd known each other since second grade. Inseparable, everyone said. She had this bold streak that made me feel braver just by being around her. Claire's parents were the relaxed type, not the kind to hover. Her mom was a nurse who worked odd shifts, and her dad was a contractor who often traveled for jobs. They had this big 2-story colonial house on a tree-lined street where most of the neighbors kept to themselves. The house always felt just a little too big for comfort when the adults were gone. But that night we saw it as freedom. It was late October, right before Halloween. The air outside was sharp with the kind of chill that hinted winter wasn't far off. Claire invited 2 other girls from school, Rachel, who loved horror movies as much as we did, and Emily, who was quieter, softer spoken. The kind of girl who laughed nervously at scary stories but still wanted to be part of the group. Claire's basement was our hangout spot. It wasn't creepy. If anything, it was cozy. The carpet was worn in but soft. The walls were painted a warm tan, and there was this massive sectional couch that could easily fit the four of us. We'd drag down sleeping bags, pile them with pillows, and spread snacks across the low coffee table in front of the old TV. That Friday night, Claire's parents told us they'd be driving into Boston for dinner with friends and wouldn't be back until close to midnight. They reminded us to keep the doors locked, and Claire just waved them off with her usual, yeah, we'll be fine. By 9 o'clock, we'd already burned through most of a cheesy horror movie, the kind where the monster was so obviously a guy in makeup that we laughed more than screamed. We stuffed ourselves with popcorn and gummy worms, daring each other to watch the jump scares without covering our eyes. It was after the movie ended that the night shifted. "Okay," Rachel said, stretching across her sleeping bag. "We've officially run out of dumb movies. You know what that means. Ghost stories." "Oh, here we go," Emily groaned, pulling her blanket up around her shoulders. "Don't act like you don't love it," Claire teased, grinning. "You're the one who asked me last week if I knew any real ones about this town." "I did not," Emily protested, her cheeks flushing pink. "Yes, you did," Claire shot back. I laughed and shook my head. "Fine, but we're keeping the lights dim. No turning everything off." We settled into the glow of one lamp in the corner. The shadows stretched long against the walls, and for the first time all night, the basement felt a little less safe. Rachel started in with a story about the old cemetery by the highway, the one people swore was haunted by a woman who died in a fire. We half laughed, half shivered as she whispered about footsteps in the grass and shadows that moved when no one else was around. I was leaning forward, fully invested, when I heard it. A faint creak, like the sound of a floorboard under weight. I froze. The others didn't seem to notice, so I brushed it off as old house noises. Claire's place was decades old. Pipes groaned, wood shifted. That was all it was. We kept going, layering story after story, voices dropping low and dramatic. But then, a half hour later, the sound came again. Louder this time. A sharp groan from directly above us. This time everyone heard it. Rachel's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. Emily tucked herself tighter into her blanket. Claire forced a laugh. "Relax. Old houses creak. My mom says this place makes noise when the temperature drops." "Yeah, but..." Rachel frowned. "That sounded like footsteps." No one argued, but no one agreed either. We tried to shake it off, but the mood was broken. Every little sound seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge upstairs, the faint rattle of the furnace. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but the hair on my arms wouldn't lie flat. And then we heard it. Voices, low, muffled, 2 of them. All of us went silent. "Was that?" Emily whispered. "Shh," Claire hissed. We held still, straining to make out the words. One voice was sharp, irritated, almost angry. The other was calmer, quieter, but insistent. They weren't Claire's parents. They weren't anyone we knew. "They're outside, right?" Rachel asked, her voice shaking. Maybe on the porch?" But before anyone could answer, there was a heavy thud directly above us in the living room. The unmistakable sound of something being set down hard. Every muscle in my body locked. "They're in the house," I whispered, my throat dry. Claire's eyes darted to the stairs. "My phone. It's upstairs, on the kitchen counter." My stomach dropped. Mine was there too. We'd all tossed them on the counter when we came in. Emily whimpered, and Rachel slapped her hand gently over her mouth. The footsteps started then, heavy, deliberate, moving from room to room upstairs. We huddled together on the couch, gripping each other's arms so tightly it hurt. My heart was pounding so loud I swore whoever was upstairs could hear it. Another creak. Then a curse word, muffled but clear. "They're looking for something," Rachel mouthed. The voices moved toward the kitchen. We could hear drawers opening, chairs shifting. They weren't just walking, they were searching. And then, 3 sharp knocks rattled the front door. All of us jolted. The voices upstairs stopped instantly. Another knock, louder. Rachel's face lit up with hope. "It's the cops. Someone must have called..." "Shh," Claire snapped, clutching my arm. We listened, every nerve stretched tight as the front door opened. A few mumbled words. Then footsteps. Fast. Fading. The door closing again. Silence. We didn't move for what felt like forever. And then Claire's phone rang. We bolted up the stairs together, our fear overridden by desperate relief. Claire snatched the phone off the counter, fumbling to answer. Her mom's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Claire, are you okay? Are the girls okay?" "Mom, what?" Claire's voice cracked. Her mom cut her off. The neighbor called the police. He saw two men sneaking around the side of the house. The officers just caught them outside. They were trying to break in. "Do not open the door for anyone until we get there." I felt my knees go weak. The air rushed out of me like I'd been holding my breath for an hour. When her parents finally came home, they hugged us so tightly it was like they'd lost us and found us again. We tried to explain what it felt like, being trapped down there, listening to strangers move just a floor above us. But the words never came close. Even now, decades later, I can still hear that muffled argument. I can still see Claire's pale face in the dim basement light. People always say ghosts or monsters are the scariest things, but that night taught me different. Real fear isn't made up. It's real people in real places at the worst possible time, and sometimes they're already inside.